Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is NDISCO'S Village Meeting Podcast. We are on episode 20, series 2. Today, we are on part 7, and that's the final part. On that topic that we have been visiting for the past few episodes, why Africans do so well in diaspora. We looked at the variables that make this happen, or the attributes. We looked at education, character building, family, and family extension, or extended family. We looked at, running away from trouble, um, many other ways how the African immigrant parents have tried in their darndest to shape the present and the future of their children, armed with just what they brought along with them thousands of miles away, with just what they learned from their own parents, and not even minding the challenges of their host countries where they found themselves. They still, you know, try and work hard, and by such hard work, they earned a place for themselves in diaspora and in the whole world as a group that does well out there despite of it all. Today we are going to attempt the to discuss this final aspect of things that also they have thrived on, and although difficult, they have tried to find ways to navigate the muddy waters and really dangerous ones of survival. So today we are going to touch on this aspect of reacting to adversity, racism, and discrimination. Everybody all over the world knows that there's always one dominant race or culture wherever you are. And being a minority culture or body because of your immigration status sometimes puts you at a disadvantage of how to go from point A to point Z. But it looks like in most cases, some people have found ways of going about their businesses because of the focus they have. And African immigrants have proven to do so in various styles and ways. And that is going to be our concluding aspect for this discussion that is based on the book I wrote a few years ago. Um, our discussions adapted from Raising an African Child in America, from my perspective as an immigrant from Nigeria, but also now a US citizen. But combining both, you still find as a parent that your mind is deep rooted back where you were brought up, the civilization, the culture, the all aspect of what started you with your life. And then you're trying to encourage your own offspring to understand where you come from. And they buy into it. And they also find that majority of the things you are sharing with them as a parent is help them, while some of them are counter to the environment they find themselves. So it's not just African. It could be Irish, it could be Mexican, it could be Asian American, or a British hyphenated one, or Canadian hyphenated one, or Iceland hyphenated one. Wherever you find yourself, you are trying to adapt. So today, as we talk about all these aspects, we are basing that on our society and culture back home in home at the homestead that I call it, and in diaspora. So let's look into this um, aspect that I talk about. So we are looking at our values, excuse me, the customs, our laws, triumphs and challenges. Again, those who know me and who have read my book know I start with Proverbs, what we call in my own Igbo land, Ilulu. Every chapter of my book started with Proverbs. And they may not all be African proverbs, but meaningful proverbs from all over the world. But this one is from Frederick Douglass. It says, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." And this is so true in all aspects of that. If in doubt, go to the prisons and see how many broken people that are in there, or everywhere, or even on the street. Broken, having diverse meanings to that. So repairing them could be if they are into so many ills of the society, they are broken. So repairing them is costly to not only the family, but to the society. So what do? We try to build these strong humanities or humans before they get to that stage. And so the African immigrant loves this, proverb, because in their eyes or within their own hearts, they are striving after traveling long, long thousands of miles away from home. They wanted to ensure that their labor was not in vain or is not in vain. And so they instill the disciplines that they have been brought up on, the disciplines that they think have helped them to thrive. So they insist that on their children. Sometimes most of them work. Sometimes some of them need to be moderated or modified, sorry. And sometimes some of them don't really fit. It's like a round peg in a square hole. So we talk about that. The other proverb that this is one African is, "Do not let what you cannot do tear from your hands what you can." What do we mean by that? That means there are things that are within your control, things you can do. And, as against things that are not within your control. Yes, the environment of the children or the African immigrant is raising their offsprings. Some aspects of that culture may be out of their control. But what they have done that really may have helped produce these results that the world is, acclaiming is maybe they are really not allowing the environment where they are to stop them from impacting what they have brought with them, what their own parents taught them, good, bad, or ugly. They don't know the difference, but they're not like, let's pass that down and see what happens. It's like shooting um, um, the stuff out there and seeing which one sticks. So that is what that one is all about. And the third proverb um, talks about, and this one is by Donnell Lamont Walker, says, "You will either profit by or pay for what your children become. Raise them properly." Now, you and I know, if you are a parent out there or it's a parent to be, you need to know this. There is no blueprint that is universal for raising a child. What works for you may not work for another because of so many differences in variables and environment where you are. So it is really sometimes when people condemn what is happening one side or the other, I kind of frown. For example, in my country, Nigeria, or in my actually community, people see children raised outside of the homestead, any other part of the world. And because they don't fit into the culture that they look at, of the language, of the mannerisms, or everything, they condemn that child or that grown up, like, calling them names. No, if you were in their own shoes, you would behave exactly that way. So we tell them, no, you can teach them the ways they don't understand than condemning in the way they do understand. So it takes, again, the village to raise a child, we continue to say, and it's a huge one. And these aspects come to that. So with all these, what did we deduce with all the differences in those three proverbs is that all hands need to be on deck if we want to continue to be, acknowledged as doing a good job of, prospering and really doing well in diaspora, way away from home. We all have to agree on some good ways. Not everybody will do the same thing, but acknowledge some things that work for everyone. And that's the essence of what I am doing with this series, actually with these past episodes, is to see the aspects that seem to work for every community that has come out of Africa, or majority of them, that there are variables that are uniform that could be stable. There are a little bit of differences in them when it comes to details, but the overall, whether it's education, whether it's character building, whether it's taking a whole village to raise a child, whether it comes to ways of, pushing back on racism and all that, family and extended family outlook, these are all things that could and have been working for the African immigrant. So let's define these a little bit. So I call it what I think it is, achieving amid the adversity, racism, and discrimination. What is it that everybody else falls prey to and majority of the African immigrants stay away from? So let's define that a little bit so that makes sense. Adversity, I think, is the African migrant in their resolve to focus, believe they know who they are. And that's the beginning. If you know who you are, then you can, put aside what everybody else thinks you are that you should dance to. No, know who you are. And so they are not easily offended when treated with disdain. So call them names. Majority of them have examples they can share, experiences, whether they're calling your names in a weird way, other people who don't know how to pronounce your name. But then if you take offense, you miss the opportunity to teach them how to correctly pronounce your name. So, you call him Didi. Didi, maybe, people say Didi because they can't pronounce N, on Dai because they think the I should be I, it's not to say, hey, don't call, that's not my name. You condemn that. No, put yourself in their shoes and help them. Our young ones are good at doing that. Most of them have now resorted to the African names that before they used to be shortened and all that. They're now beginning to learn, call me by my name. And this is what it means. And this is where the African parents came in to teach these young ones. This is the meaning of your name. So it relates to you. It's not just a word thrown out there. If for those Christians where John, Joseph, and all that, those names were given because they come from saints. That's the meaning to the European community. But to us, that somebody is calling you and you're calling you Obina, for example, in the Igbo language, Obina, the heart of the Father. It means something. It means Ngozi, you are a blessing. So with those, we are looking at. So in that case, we do not, in that, try to get offended when you mispronounce our name. We find a way. That's an opportunity to teach. These immigrant Africans or African immigrants have a goal. Nothing and no one will steer them away from that goal. So in such regard, they wear the cloak of another African proverb that says, patience can cook a stone. Meaning that no matter how impossible a problem seems, it can be resolved with patience mixed with persistence. So we keep driving. I was watching a young one trying to get a teacher through pronouncing his name. I stood by and watched. The teacher will say, Shukumeka. In Igbo, Chukwuemeka is the name, and he didn't like the way the teacher was called because the teacher has been able to pronounce all the names that don't even have consonants, vowels, sorry, in his fellow students. So he insisted, no, my name is Chukwuemeka. And the way he was shaping his mouth to let the teacher know that this is the way to say it really was fun. You could have been there. So the teacher made attempt again and again, Chukwuemeka, Chukwuemeka, no, Chukwuemeka. And they went back and forth till the teacher was at least halfway. I had to step into to rescue poor teacher. Like I got to teach. So with a child of that mind, knowing that's their persistence in getting it right. This is who I am. Don't give me somebody else's name. You see. So as the hyphenated African youth and young adults assume their host country citizenship by birth or naturalization, the goal gets even more focused. Yes, I am British by naturalization or I was born there, but that's not my ancestry. Now I've gained two, maybe because of dual citizenship, but I still have the other half of me. They are reminded that even though the way has been paved, they still have to work even twice as hard to assume their place in the global world. And that is one thing that the parents need to help these children to do. Now, remember that those Africans, remember when I talked about the first immigrants, second, third, and fourth? Now, those, I won't call them millennials, those baby boomers, for example, who came and now they have their offspring. Their offsprings now are beginning to have their own offsprings as the next generation down, who may never have stepped a foot in Africa. And it's hard to get them to understand what these parents or grandparents now are trying to, make them understand. So the patience and the persistence have to be there. Let's talk about racism and discrimination. The young is raised to go about and not allowing such phenomenon to be a burden on their backs. And it's hard to do that. And I'm taking an example from the American system where some of us sometimes go back and forth from British, Canada, Australia, you name it. Parents will tell you that this exists. Okay. There is discrimination, there is racism, there is no ifs and buts about it. Even those in Nigeria, for example, or in Timbuktu, or in Malawi, wherever, there are also subtle discriminations and racism. They may not be by color and all that, it may be by tribe. So there is always some kind of discrimination going on anywhere in the world. But what you have to know is that you have the right, as anyone else, to become productive. You can benefit from the environment as well as give back to the environment. So, yes, there is racism, there is discrimination. What the African immigrant has been able to do that has now resulted in all this acclaim is that they know those things exist, but they push back on that, focusing on the fact that they have to be productive. So they study harder, they stay out of trouble in order to benefit from the environment, get what they can, abhor what is not, closer to whatever else culture, as well as giving back. So this is where we are, and this is the emphasis we are trying to lay. So what does that mean in the breakdown? In the breakdown is that there appears to be greater or growing appreciation of certain aspects of our culture by our children and the traditions, even from thousands of miles away, those that are not even on African soil, diaspora soil, are also learning that because the world is becoming a global village. It's no longer them versus us, it's us, all in one box. These examples are in the hip hop life, the music, the food that are now so universal that you can not discriminate one from the other. Okay. But remember, the most important thing that African immigrants, for example, brought was the main goal, and that was always to perpetuate the culture and customs that they grew up in, as that is why what they know best, and they believe these values have served them well growing up. Okay. But one thing that they keep forgetting, these African immigrants, is that society changes. Okay. Even the country where they, or the nations, or the continent where they came from, the culture is changing. Okay. Somewhat. Yeah. To hold on to those past experiences could be good for, the present and the future, but it could also be disastrous. And that is one point we're trying to make here. Where if changes are made, or the pendulum shifts, will these acknowledgements or these accolades still be given to African immigrants? I don't know. But what we need to do is, try to look around and listen. Our parts as immigrant parents, I believe, must be to continue to do what we do best, what we know as rites of passage, or rite de passage, like the French will say it. But let us apply the understanding that our children may not follow them rigidly, due to the fact that they must also exist within this global culture. This global culture is what they are born into and raised on, while propagating their ancestry. So we need to realize as parents, or as that group that have gotten these acclaims and all that, that we were raised under a different era and did not experience a lot of what the children today, or the younger ones today, are going through. Okay? We need to understand that our children, those hyphenated Africans in diaspora, for example, are now at crossroads. They're struggling with two or more culture, three or more culture, as you can think of, many places. Okay. A typical child is expected to speak their mother tongue and communicate in English, which is now one of the, universal, or French, learn to speak Spanish in some aspects where, that is what is available, or German, or, whatever language there is. Okay? In the bucket of areas where they have to function. So there should be room for them also to imbibe these cultures that surround them. Is one culture better than the other? I don't know. There could be some pros and cons, but this is what we struggle with. So the biggest question is now, how do we continue to excel as diasporan immigrants, expanding on the variables that have helped us earn the accolades from many? So again, this is where we look into this saying by J. Wooten, on the supposed unsuitability of fairy tales. So whatever culture we want to imbibe, or impact, whatever we are doing as immigrant Africans, or African immigrants, as people, we need to put at the back of our hands that fairy tales teach children that the world is fraught with danger, including life-threatening danger. But by being clever, always honest as a rule, but with common sense exceptions, being courteous, especially to the elderly, no matter their apparent social station, and kind to anyone in obvious need, Even a child can succeed where those who seem more qualified have failed. And this is what African parents have tried to instill in their children, whether home or abroad or in diaspora, okay, to let them go on believing that the world is safe, that they will be provided for and achieve worthwhile things, even if they remain stupid, shock their integrity, despise courtesy, and act only from self interest, that they ought to rely on only those who are stronger, smarter, and more able to solve their problems, is the gravest disservice to these young ones and to the society as a whole. This is exactly what the African immigrant has done in order to give to the next generation what to survive with, what to thrive on. One thing we must realize is that our children, our next generation next in diaspora, the hyphenated ones, we must realize that they have a nationality all their own. Okay. It's a little bit different from their parents, the one they brought with them. Although some of them, parents are naturalized and all that, wherever they are, the children have diverse background to work with. They belong in a world really different from their parents and may not see things exactly as others have. Okay? So while we enjoy these differences, while we look at how we have come thus far, we also have to keep an eye on what comes in the future, that all the accolades we've received on why we are doing well as African immigrants may not always be there, because the ones that we imparted, our knowledge of how we were brought up, may now be bringing theirs up, having also been laden with other cultures, and they are trying to balance all of that. So when I say they're at crossroads, it means that nothing without them is lost. Nothing that they have inherited from us is lost. It's just that there's a whole lot that they have to grapple with in order to fit into the entire world picture that exists. It may change tomorrow, but that's where we are. But it doesn't stop the African immigrant to keep emphasizing on those things that are universal to all of them, that are the basics. We mentioned it there, that of honesty, that of integrity, that of hard work, that of education, that of staying out of trouble, that of persevering and trying to navigate against racism and discrimination, but still stay focused on what needs to be done. We have heard so many people say, "Oh, those Africans, they work hard. They just try to excel." And we've seen people do skits like that on social media. Or, for example, Nigerians like money, so they don't get into trouble, they just focus. Yeah, we're not perfect, but some people, some of them also go astray. So, what we're trying to say here is that there are still things we can do to keep the ball rolling without having these children or the next generation lose out on everything, including what is possible for them, but also be able to be children of the world. I call myself a daughter of the world because I try to learn from every culture and everything. Somebody was laughing at me the other day because I started off now learning a little bit of Turkish languages because I love their movies. But at the same time, I am learning Spanish because I just get fascinated by by people speaking that as well. And so what's wrong with doing that? So you could always indulge in other people's culture to understand them better. And we are hoping that other people will in turn or in tune try to, understand the African culture, why we do what we do. When we discipline a child, we're not punishing them. But, there is a line to be crossed between punishment and discipline. That's where we learn. So I thank you for listening today and as well as be coming along with me during all these discussions on why Africans do so well in diaspora, as adapted from my book, Raising an African Child in America. The book is also on audio, electronic listening as well. I thank you for reporting in. Please subscribe for those of you who haven't. There are so many, many more fascinating topics coming up in our next episodes. Thank you and have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. And I see you in May. This concludes the April version or the April sessions that we have. The spirit of Ubuntu, you are because I am, and I am because you are. Thank you. Bye-bye. This is Dr. Marcellina and M.OPARAOJI signing off.